Okay, so this week we're going to be going over Active Directory management. So this is going to be going over creating users, groups, OUs, and then how we manage them, and then more importantly, how you manage user accounts, and then what the management tools are. So our learning objectives are we're going to just be able to describe the different types of AD groups and their use within a forest, use the Active Directory users and computers management tool to create and manage OU, user, group, and computer objects. So groups, so there's two main types of AD groups. There's distribution groups and security groups. So the group scope is also something that you define when you create a group, or you can change it later. So this organizes the rights and permissions assigned across multiple domains. Use a combination within a forest to determine or to organize the assignment of permissions. So there's the global scope, the domain local scope, and the universal scope. And then on this table here, it's going to show us what some of the differences are. So allowed members for global, you have objects in the same domain as the global group. And then any domain can access that group to use its membership for any number of certain things. You have a domain local, so that the allowed members are objects located within any domain in the forest. So the only domains that can access that are the domain where the local group resides. So this is more of a non-cross domain group, so you can't really read it from another domain. And then you have universal, which objects for allowed members, objects can be located within any domain in the forest, and then any domain in the forest can access that group. So the most flexible is universal, the second most flexible is global, and then domain local is really for just stuff that's inside that local domain that doesn't need to be accessed outside of that. So working with organizational units, more commonly referred to as OUs. So when you open up the Active Directory users and computers admin tool, there is it says here new domain only has one OU called domain controllers by default. There's other folders, but the only one that's truly a organizational unit is the domain controllers OU. The other folders exist to organize the default objects within the domain. So in order to create an OU, you right click on the folder or domain under which you want to create it, and then you click new, and then organizational unit, new window comes up, you supply the name, and then if you want to protect a container from accidental deletion, this is a good option because you can't just delete it, you have to there's an additional question that comes up when that is selected. So here is kind of what the AD users and computers tool looks like, and then here's kind of your structure that you can lay out. So we have domain controllers, which is there by default. You can see that there's an accounting one that was created, marketing, IT, production, and when we get into the lab 5-1 this week, you'll see that we're going to do something similar to that and create a structure in there. So here is when you right click and do new organizational unit, this is the screen that pops up. You can see, give it a name, and then protect from deletion. So working with user objects, so prior to a user logging into the domain, you need to create a domain user account in the appropriate OU. So within the AD users and computers tool, you can right click wherever you want to create the user, whatever OU, whether that's the users area, or if you're going to use a custom created OU, which we're going to do in lab 5-1, you right click, you do new, and then user. It opens up the new user object wizard. and then you supply the appropriate information. When you hit next, you give a new password, confirm it, and then any of the account options like reset password, that type of thing. And then you hit finish and it creates the user object. You can then add additional attributes to the user like phone, email, that type of stuff as well. And then you perform the other common user management functions like resetting password, all that type of stuff in that same way. So here you can see this is the new user object window. So we give it first name, last name, and then it'll automatically populate the full name. So then you have your user login name. That's going to be the domain name that the name that they use to log into the computer. And then you have your pre-Windows 2000, which is generally the same as the user logo name, unless it's a really long username. Here's kind of the screen that you get to if you just double click on a user or go to properties. You can see there's a lot more options here. So this is where you'll set things like their office, their manager, telephone number, all that in all of these tabs across the top here. You can add them to groups, all kinds of things like that, which you'll get into more in our Lab 5.1. And then here is when you right click on a user, you have some additional options where you can disable the account, reset password, you can move it, obviously you could delete it, you could rename the display name if for some reason you need to rename it. Good reason for that is if somebody's name changes, the display name does not change. So if you change their last name, for example, a woman gets married or a man gets married, they change their last name, you can't change that. It doesn't automatically change the display name, so you have to actually update the display name. So you could do that with the rename here, or simply just clicking on it to bring up a text editor on the name. But here, most importantly used is the reset password, and then disable account for disabling accounts. So group objects, so groups are what simplify the assignment of rights and permissions to users. So this is how a lot of things will assign permissions by groups. Pretty much everything does by group, either group or OU. So that's a key part of this that you'll need to understand. When you create a group object, you basically do it the same way you do a user. You just right click the OU you want to create it and you do new group. Then you have to supply the type, the scope, and the name. And then you manage the group membership through the same AD users and computers tool. You go to properties, and then you can see the members tab, which will allow you to add members. You can also see on a user object what groups they're a member of, and you can add them to a group there as well. So computer objects, so these are what gets created in Active Directory when you join a computer to the domain. So you'll want to, you've already seen that in our previous labs where we joined the servers to the domain and they showed up in the computer's OU. So there's two ways to move a computer account object to an OU. So you can either right click on the computer account and then click the move button, and then you get kind of a tree view of your domain structure, and you can then move it through there by clicking an OU and hitting OK. And then secondly, you could right click on the appropriate OU and do click new computer. Also, in the newer versions of the administrative tool, you can just click and drag the computer object to the OU that you want it to go to. You'll get an additional pop-up when that happens, but you can do it that way as well. The encryption key that is used on your domain computer is directly associated to the computer accounts in Active Directory. So that is the main reason that you need a computer account in Active Directory, to communicate with the domain controller. And then here's a note about hardware failure. So If for some reason you have to reinstall Windows and say the device completely fails a hard drive, you got to redo it. Well, you're going to have to more than likely delete that computer object out of Active Directory because it's not going to have the same significant identifier when you rejoin it to the domain, and likely you're not going to use the same computer name. So you can delete them directly from Active Directory if for some reason it's stolen or something like that as well. So here is a snapshot of the Active Directory Administrative Center. So this is the newer version of the Active Directory Users and Computers tool. It's more in the server management style look and feel. I prefer the Active Directory Users and Computers admin tool over this. This to me is a little bit chaotic, but if you guys want to explore it, you get to it from the same way you get to the Users and Computers tool, from the Tools menu in Server Manager, and it's just called Active Directory Administrative Center. So summary for this module that we've gone over is organizational units provide a logical way to group the Active Directory objects. Groups can be used for security or email distribution. Group scopes organize forest resource permission assignments. So what domains can access those groups is based on what the scope is of the group. Computer objects represent computers that have users logging onto the domain. And then Active Directory user objects store user-based info and passwords. So that's it for this week. There's not a whole lot of content. There's a lot more discussion in the Lab 5-1 when we go through and create all of the users and OUs and groups that we're going to need for this lab for the rest of the term. So if you're moving on to Lab 5-1, good luck, and that's it.